Hello, 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 everyone. Sorry for being a little bit late. I was frantically scribbling away notes. I didn't even get through like all of them today. Have a look. Yeah, we have a bunch of people today. So I think intro today is going to be quite short. We're going to be jumping into feedback relatively quickly this time. I'm just rolling up my sleeve in preparation for the stream. Hello, Galazar. Hello, Slate. Hello, Sheila. Victoria, Pooty. Sovanima, good to see you. Don't recognize that name. Hello, Rustam. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you're all doing well. Hope everyone's doing good, having a good week. All right. All right. Switch it on then. Hello, Senkai. Good to see you too. How are you doing? Hello, Arvid. I was gonna say, we are gonna look at a report that just came out. I don't know. You might be into it, you might not be, but Matthew Ball, who wrote a report about the state of the industry, basically compiling like a bunch of analytical data about this industry, came out with like a new report, and I just started skimming through it this morning, and I have some notes, some interesting notes that I took, and we're gonna be having a look at those pages to kind of see where the industry is headed. And I think there's some interesting stuff for all of us to be aware of there. So we're gonna be having a look at that in just a second. But yeah, that's probably gonna be the little bit introduction here. There were some really interesting graphs about like outsourcing, obviously layoffs, because that's like a big thing, but also hiring as well, because there are like a bunch of new positions opening up, but it is interesting that the demographic is completely different to what it was before. So we're diving into that in just a sec. But yeah. So House on Fire meme when I'm fine. It is interesting. I think the House on Fire meme was 1 and 2 years ago. I think we're dousing the fires, and then we're seeing what we can salvage from the house at this point. Francesco Gamba. Hello, everybody. Been a while since my last stream. Nice to be back. Hey, good to see you, Francisco. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, so we're gonna look into that report in just a second. Let me prepare that as well. Did I on screen somewhere? Yeah, there we go. It is an early access edition. You can get access to the report in the link that I'll share in a little bit as well. Yeah, it literally came out like 2 days ago, so we're gonna be having a look in a bit. But yeah, otherwise this week has been going good. I am gonna try to make this stream somewhat shorter, right? So shorten the introduction, be a little bit more succinct with the feedback. And then also Friday's stream is gonna be shorter too, because I want to get a whole lot of stuff done as we ramp up to release early access for our courses. So I really want to spend like a whole bunch of time like trying to finish up as much as I can over the weekend. So yeah, I think Friday's stream will just be portfolio reviews, and then we're probably going to be I'm probably just going to jump into more work after that off stream. So yeah, just to keep you on the loop. Get a sip of water before we begin. But yeah, I hope everyone else doing well. How's everyone else week been? Everyone had a good artistic week so far? Let me know what you're working on. I mean, I guess that's what we're going to be doing in just a little bit as well. But yeah. This week was productive for me somehow. Hey, that's awesome. Hello, Powertail. Good to see you, buddy. Yeah, I feel like this week has also been pretty productive. yeah, it's it feels like it's been a mix. Like today was less productive at work, but then I feel like a bit more energized now. So we'll see. For work, I've been in Paris previous week. Hey, that's awesome. Dang, I've never been in Paris. And it's relatively close by to where I'm at, so... Did you have a good time? And Francisco is crying because he's working on trees. That's understandable. That's understandable. And then Galazar is saying, I think so, yes. Okay, that's good. That's good. A nice artistic week. Hello, Liz. Good to see you. Happy to have you here. But yeah, it is interesting. I feel like, I don't know why I'm more productive. Well, I do this thing, right? I do this thing where I try to distill or like reverse engineer like when I feel well, like what was the impetus for that, right? Or what was the driving force that week? And I feel this week my productivity is higher because I am watching a whole bunch of concept art videos, interestingly enough. So there's this I guess concept art and fundamentals, and also portfolio reviews and all that kind of stuff from other people to learn a bunch of stuff there. It's mostly concept art, so it's more seeing like what's happening in like an adjacent field, which is really interesting. But yeah, I was watching a bunch of those things. Timothée Maton, owner of the Artness, is doing like a bunch of really interesting portfolio reviews. He's definitely a bit more blunt with them as well. But it is really interesting to see how someone else gives reviews so that I can also pick up from it as well. What else? What else am I watching? Oh yeah, the concept art tutorials that I've been watching is from Feng Su Design. I think I've mentioned this before, but FCD school was like Feng Su Design School, which was like a pretty well-known concept art school in Singapore, but he now stopped that. Interestingly enough, he's getting into like full game dev from what I can tell. So he's like building up his own studio from scratch because he sees a lack of creativity in AAA and he wants to piggyback on that, which is really interesting. Yeah. But that's a lot of my driving force. And he just talks about, there was this one, I remember the number of it, but there was this episode about time management. I watched it a couple of times, and to be honest, like there's a lot of just like painting related stuff in there, not necessarily time management, but it was still so nice to see the creativity on screen and getting inspired by that. Because yeah, I think sometimes you can like feed off of someone else's creativity in like a very positive way, and I think that's what I'm doing with Feng Su. Your texture stones. Let's go, Galazar. Yeah, we're gonna have a look at those in just a bit. Zenkai is creating manual retopology, but Quadro was a mistake. Been working on it for too long. Yeah, sometimes you have to do it. I mean, especially for your portfolio, so that you can showcase that you know what optimization is. But you don't have to do it on anything, right? So if you're doing it for a project, do it on one asset, make it look really good, and then you don't have to care about it for the rest of it, right? Because for anything that's not going to be animating, you can honestly just do Decimate or something like that. Did level art? Tons of it. Hey! Me too. Me too. Partel saying, dude, for some reason the same. Whenever I take the time to watch things related to art or productive things, I tend to feel more informed and productive in my week. Yeah! Yeah. Wait, you don't? Is this talking about the optimization that I was just talking about? Here's the thing. I think you need to showcase that you can do optimization, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it on everything on your personal work, right? Because honestly, just I don't think there's like no point. Arvid is saying slam nanite and call it a day. yeah. Just take a checkbox. It's fine. It's fine. Rustam, I've seen you spending more time on LinkedIn. I've also seen you on, God, Next Level Game Art, that YouTube channel. I was watching some of their videos as well, and I saw you in the comments too. Yeah, man, doing the rounds. Started spending more time on LinkedIn, and it feels good so far. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Just make it a routine to not only consume, but then also like post on it, right? But I think you're doing good, man. Doing good. Hello, Fair. Hello. Cool. Okay. I said that I was not going to make it too long, so let me jump into a thing that I wanted to talk about. So there's this report. It's called The State of Video Games in 2026, or Growth and Where to Find It, right? So let me switch on over. I am not going to read through the whole thing. It's 164 pages long. I have read through the majority of it, and I've kind of made some notes on like interesting pages that we're going to look at together, right? So let me switch it on up. Not that one. Well, I guess we can do that one. Cool. Don't know what happened there, but we'll deal with it. Oh wait, let me actually see if we can fix that real quick. Oh, that's the same thing. Why? Why is it showing that one? Did my screen switch or something? Did I unplug them? No, right? Huh. Interesting. Okay, give me a sec. We're gonna fix this real quick. Let me see. So. Right. Okay. We'll just deal with it right now. Cool. Oh, excuse me. All right. Sorry about that. I just choked on a freaking peanut. Yeah, you can definitely have a link. Here you go. That's it. So you can download the report there. But okay, so let's dive into this a bit. Again, we're gonna skip through a whole bunch of stuff here, right? So if you want to read this yourself, I find this stuff really interesting. I just look through the whole thing, and I'm gonna distill some of the interesting stuff that is relevant to us, right? So, but again, I do recommend looking through this yourself. So, a couple of notes here. So, basically, this whole document talks about like where growth is going, like where growth is coming from, where stagnation is coming from, the effects on the industry, all that kind of stuff, right? We can see worldwide consumer spending on video game content. Obviously, we are big, right? People spend a lot of money on video games, and you can see why there's still like so many companies going after mobile content, right? If you look at this graph, that's all you need to know. That's where people spend their money, so that's where most people want to be, right? But let's skip through some stuff. I think in the beginning here, so obviously we know about the industry layoffs and all that kind of stuff that was really big, right? We can see that is the effect of this. So this is venture capital money coming into games during COVID because they saw like a lot of potential for them to reap the benefits of it, right? Then we obviously had, everyone's gonna get back to normal, and people started spending more time outside again, so less investment in games. But budgets like ballooned, a lot of development studios ballooned, and obviously the effect of that was that wasn't sustainable for the long term, right? It was basically a big gamble for the industry just to be like, hey, look, we have all this money coming in, we're gonna try and capitalize on it. For some of them it worked, For some others, it didn't, right? Obviously, have all the cancellations and shutdowns and all that kind of stuff. But a good thing here is that, sure, 2022, that was like a big year, and then it got worse and it got worse. But 2025, it got better. Now, I kind of felt like this was going on, right? But what is interesting is that, and this is something that I saw coming as well, or that I have talked about, is that the open roles that are now becoming more available because there is so much financial pressure on the industry. That means that it is way too expensive right now to hire a bunch of people in North America, because that's where the most expensive people are going to be, right? Especially California. You can see that a lot of layoffs happened in that region specifically, right? Because that was the most expensive region by far. And we can actually see that in terms of open positions, a lot of it is shifting more towards the east, right? China, Europe is still holding strong, but it seems like there's diminishing numbers happening in like North America, right? Still a good amount of openings, right? Still 13% of like total job openings, which is like still a sizable chunk. But you can definitely see a shift from the west to the east, right? I found that really interesting to realize, or like to see the data. So yeah, this was really, really interesting to kind of see. And that was like my first note where I was like, okay, this is really cool to see where like the jobs are kind of going to, right? Again, I don't know if there's like too much relevancy. This is more about the numbers. This is about like where they're spending their time. I think I'm gonna skip through a bunch of stuff here. Let me see. There was some crazy graphs about Roblox. And I think if you're, I don't know how I feel about this yet, because I don't know too much about that market. But if you are thinking about making money as an independent artist, I think Roblox is the place to be. As weird as that sounds, it sounds like that's where a lot of people are now making like, well, I don't know. Like there's always going to be this thing where it's going to be the 1% is making like a shit ton of money, and then maybe the next 10% is doing okay-ish, and then there's nothing left, right? Like you basically have like 90% of people finding for like scratch. Are we the same but our pride, kinda? I do feel the same way. I mean, especially if you come from AAA, right? And then you look at like a bunch of kids making their own games on Roblox. It is like, oh, that's not real. But also, they are making way more money than I do, right? I mean, not in general, right? But if you look at some of the numbers coming out there, it's crazy, you know? So I think that's going to be everyone's kind of like personal prerogative, right? Like where you want to go, or like where you want to position yourself. But I think if you're thinking about like opening, I don't know, doing some like additional income kind of stuff, Roblox might be a way to explore, right? Because if you just care about like running a business, might be interesting. Who knows? But let's see. Let me see if I can find some graph actually. Because there was some crazy stuff in here from yeah, this is all talking about like this was also interesting, like the segmentation of different countries and which countries grew and which countries are going down in terms of like the amount of time and money that people are spending on games, which was really interesting. But again, I'm gonna skip through some stuff here. This is about mobile stuff, and have a look. Advertising. So in here they basically say these are the 5 biggest like revenues for growth for video games in 2026, right? I was really focused on external development because I saw that shift happening, like drastic shift happening, right? Where you see a bunch of big teams just being like, hey, look, we're just gonna let a bunch of people go and we're just gonna hire cheaper external development studios, right? Especially to do the stuff that's not crucial, right? And I think a lot of companies are doing that now. And even smaller AA's, right? Or like indie developers are doing the same thing, right? Because it just makes for a more sound strategy if you don't have like the runway to like. Is grading assets for Roblox different, or does it have to be the same pipeline as PBR assets? No, it is different from what I've heard. And take this with a grain of salt because I have not looked into it. I was just talking to like a friend of mine like a couple of months ago because he was getting into it. And it is heavily restricted, right? Because it is not supposed to be this professional development tool. It's supposed to be made for kids, right? So instead of Roblox, it's always okay to make mods for other games like GTA 5 or Sims. A lot of people are still paying for it. Yeah, what I don't know, right? I have no clue. But it's always interesting to do market research, right? Like really dive into those spaces because I have no idea about GTA or The Sims, but you might be right. Maybe there's like an untapped market that you really gravitate towards and you're like, hey, look, I'm just gonna make some stuff here, you know? And I also feel, I don't know how these licenses work, right? But let's say you have, I don't know, let's say you have a catalog of like cloth assets, right? Like clothes and all that kind of stuff for The Sims. Maybe there's a little bit of extra work that you can do to then also transfer them to other games, potentially, you know? Who knows? So are you saying that there's light at the end of the tunnel? What I'm saying is that information is power, and if you want to be informed, this whole thing is really interesting to read so that you can draw your own conclusions from it and then better position yourself in the future. Because the stuff that we're seeing now, and this was really interesting, this is also why I was listening to FCD talk about this too. This is this contraction that we've seen in the market, right? This happens, and it's gonna happen in the future. And it happened in the past as well. So it's more thinking about like, okay, where is the future headed? And how can I be a part of that future by looking at some of the data, right? Anyway, let's have a look. So we're seeing mobile ads. This is all about advertisement. We're gonna skip through all this stuff. It is very interesting to read, right? This is all like really nerdy stuff. Like this is about like trying to circumvent like payment processors by doing like direct to consumer stuff. This is really interesting, but this is more like business related, right? So I'm gonna skip through all of this. And I think page, yeah, so we're going into like the external development thing. This is interesting, right? So green is in-house spend, right? So this is the total amount of investment that was spent, and this is in billions, right, on in-house versus outsource, right? And you can see, obviously, it kind of ballooned in or around COVID, right? It really went up. But we can see that in terms of like market dominance, like outsourcing is becoming more and more popular with almost like 35% of the budget going to, or development spend going to outsourced companies, right? Codev, outsource. So that was really interesting. What is also interesting is some of these. See, yeah, this was also an interesting one where with this slide, they're basically saying lack of resources was like a third most cited reason to use outsourcing in 2022, right? Because they were like, hey, look, no one wants to come and work for us, blah, 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 blah. Because we just have like massive hiring sprees of people just getting hired and hired and hired, and no one's really being let go, right? What that meant, according to like most of the bigger companies and the CEOs, was that there was so much competition in like the big hubs that all the local resources dried up, right? At least in their opinion. But actually it switched. So of course, now because they fired a bunch of people, the local lack of local resources is switched, right? So they that's not their biggest concern right now, but it's switched to letting people go for cost saving measures, right? So that was an interesting one. I think there's another graph in here where the proportion of work outsourced among the outsourced users in creative disciplines is really interesting. So we're seeing a rise in most of the stuff that we do, right? So, well, actually, 3D environments here has gone down slightly, which is interesting. But you can definitely see that like characters, weapons, vehicles, 3D props, like basically all the things that are really easy to compartmentalize, right? Which basically means that if it doesn't affect like anything else, right? If it's really easy to say like, hey, look, you need to go there, or we I don't know, we need to have a barrel or something like that, right? That doesn't have an effect on like the larger narrative structure of the game. So that's like really easy to outsource. But that was interesting. Yeah, and obviously this is gonna be no surprise, right? Like Team Cherry, for example, the people working on Silksong, 3 internal people, like almost 100 external people. I think I would be curious to see where that comes from, because I feel that a lot of it also has to do with localization, right? But yeah. And then I'm not gonna go into this, but this is fucking nuts. Like, if you want to see, like, at the end of 2024, like, just this statement, Roblox had more daily active users than PlayStation, Switch, or Xbox. A year later, their daily active users went up by 70%. That is fucking nuts, right? And even though I totally agree with you, Arvid, it's like we don't take it seriously, right? But this is the powerhouse. There's some really interesting and really confrontational statements that are made here just for like a creative, right? Like if you just look at this graph and like how quick it's growing, and this is not even like accounting for off-platform engagement and all that kind of stuff, right? Look at this. Monthly hours of engagement spent. Isn't that nuts? Like this graph, like this blew me away. It's fucking crazy. That Roblox has like double the amount of like engagement compared to the entirety of Steam? What? Ah, fair. Yes, now we get into the moral quandaries, right? I have the same thing. I am also not comfortable with doing this. But there's also a part of me. There's also a part of me that we, as the games industry at large, have been setting this up for Roblox to come in and swoop away all the profits. That's how I feel about it too. So it's like, sure, like, yeah, they went ham and they really, I don't know, they turned into like a very addicting algorithm kind of thing, right? But all the other games are slowly going there as well, you know? But yeah, that's also an important thing to say. I have not touched Roblox at all, right? So take this old man's face with like a grain of salt, because I have no clue. Is it cheaper for studios to use an outsourced studio to make assets? Oh yeah. Well, it is cheaper. It's like way cheaper, right? Because if you think about like, let's say an outsource studio, right? Usually they're in like more affordable places. So if you think about that, right? Like more affordable places, you can get like a 3D artist in the Philippines for like, I don't know what the rates would be, right? But let's say 10% for like an American worker's wage, right? So if you can then be like, hey, look, we still need to have that core team to drive like all the core functionality and the core functionality of the game, but then the rest of it we can just easily just outsource, right? Senkai is saying Roblox is the problem, delete it and the yin and yang will balance out. I don't think so. Well, first of all, I don't think Roblox is going to go anywhere. And if Roblox is gonna go away, then a lot of people are probably gonna go maybe to Fortnite. they don't have that like ecosystem, right? Not to the same degree that Roblox seems to be having a grip on especially younger audiences, right? But it is interesting because there was something about the audiences in here as well. Let me see if I can find it. And again, I do want to say I'm not a defender of Roblox, you know? I've not touched it. Like, I've just seen other people play with it. I also have like my moral quandaries with it, but let's see. Right. The graph on the left. Over 13 and under 13, right? So I have a feeling, I mean, we don't know like a specific age, right? But I have the feeling that, like, you know, when we said that like TikTok is for young kids, and even though like 50% at that point was already like dominated by like older people, basically, maybe we're misreading that, and maybe the same happened with Roblox as well. I have no idea. I have no idea. That'll be interesting to get some data on. Justin is saying, but isn't this temporary? Roblox is popular to a specific age group who will likely grow out of it in a short amount of time. But here's the thing, though. I think the reason why they want to capture that younger audience is because that has a lot of staying power itself, you know? Think about the games that you grew up with and like how much nostalgia, or like how much maybe some of you still play it, right? I have the same thing. So I think the whole thing about like trying to capture a young audience is that they can capture them quicker and then retain them for a longer period of time, right? I have the feeling that is the thing. But isn't it temporary? Yeah, for sure. I mean, until the next thing comes out, Roblox is the king now, but who's gonna say what the next thing is gonna be, right? Studios make live service games to make money. Copy of Fortnite, Overwatch, etc. I guess they need to make Roblox too. Well, interesting that you say that, because I think all of this that we're talking about now, I heard on a podcast with Tim Sweeney that the future of Unreal Engine 6 is gonna be merging Unreal Engine for Fortnite into the main engine. So probably making it like more approachable for like young people to also make their own games, you know, and like building a bridge there. But I think there's also another reason that they see like all this stuff happening and they want a bigger slice of that pie, right? But yeah. So I think companies are making moves towards that. Time to switch to another engine, baby. Yeah. But like that doesn't really matter, right? I mean, to me it feels like, okay, if that's the thing that's going to happen, because to me at least, the biggest issue is how should I say this? Is how lax Roblox is with their parental controls, right? And how they go about like treating the kids on the platform and all that kind of stuff. That comes with scale as well, right? But yeah, I feel that Unreal is in a better position to get a better control over that. But yeah, we'll see. Time will tell, right? People still love Habbo Hotel and Club Penguin. Yeah, 100%. Poptropia was my Roblox back in the day. I have never heard about that. Poptropica. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. This was just like really interesting to read. And we can see here, right? These are individual games. Xbox wasn't even on the graph, by the way. Yeah, Blizzard is, right? They're part of Xbox. So, but this is crazy. This is a single game on Roblox competing with all the titles of Blizzard in terms of hours of engagement. It's crazy. So out of touch, Roblox is just like Lego Fortnite VR type game, right? it is kind of like a creator driven community of like games, I guess, right? It's only about that size of pie. Unreal already has the most inclusive game engine, so Unreal Engine integration is kind of weird. Well, yeah, I don't know. Time will tell, right? I feel that, in my opinion, the Unreal Engine for Fortnite integration into like the mainline engine would also be weird, because who knows where that is going to go in the future, right? But yeah, I would also hate to like maintain like two separate branches of the engine at all times for different audiences too, so I don't know. I have no idea. You meant the previous one? Yeah, but I mean, yeah, Blizzard is on here as well. B's next workshop has to be how to make money on Roblox. I mean, so I would love to do like a workshop on how to be more independent as an artist, right? That is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I've explored like a bunch of sides. And I do feel really passionate about that topic. I just have no idea about Roblox, honestly. The closest thing that I got was I was following someone on Twitter who then started making costumes for Roblox back in the day, and now that's like his full-time job. And yeah, he's making, like, from what I've heard, like really, really good money with it. But he was doing that like, oh my god, like 8 years ago or something like that. I don't even know. Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. Yeah, 10 billion hours of engagement per month. It's crazy. But this is the thing, right? Like, sometimes it's good to look at these graphs and then just be like, oh my god, like, I'm totally reading the room wrong. Because to a certain degree, that's also what's happening in AAA at the moment, right? Is that a lot of games, they just read, or like a lot of development studios, they read the room wrong, and then they release a game that no one wants, and it's like, hey, what? We're gonna have to lay off a bunch of people, right? So that's why I'm saying information is power, right? Like, this is to your benefit, and you can probably learn some interesting things about all this data. For example, here, right? So all the developers on Roblox, right? It would be interesting to see the spread of individual earnings, but like all the developers in Roblox are now taking home like 1.5 billion per year, right? Which is like, that's a big payout. But again, you have to look at it on an individual basis, and you have to see if the content is something that you gravitate towards too, right? So let's see. Was there anything here? Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there because we do have to get into some feedback as well. But I would definitely say, have a look at this report. There's some interesting stuff in here. Maybe it's a little bit too dry for like a full breakdown, but yeah, it is. I found it really interesting. So I hope that was helpful. And then if something else comes up, like here that I find interesting, I'll probably do like a very quick like overview of some of this stuff, because I think it can be really helpful for us to be more informed. So I'll share the link again. So go check it out and stay informed. Understand why Xbox wants to be Roblox. I don't think Xbox wants to be Roblox. I feel like Epic at the moment is like the closest to what Roblox is. I don't think that Xbox or PlayStation are trying to be that at the moment. Sure, they wanted to have like live service games, right? But not to the same degree that like Roblox is doing, where it's like a community-driven thing. PlayStation and Xbox are still like in the mindset, I would say more of a traditional mindset, I guess, right? I don't know how else to describe it. More something that I gravitate towards myself as well. That is more like, hey, look, we make this game, and then if a community forms around it, that's good, but you don't allow the community to like make a bunch of content yourself and then have like a bunch of monetization around it as well, right? Is a Roblox company making a big share of that, even if it's community made? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know the numbers, right? You can probably find that in this documentation as well. But from what I know is that any transaction that happens on Roblox, they get a percentage of it, right? So what I also know, and this is kind of gonna go like counteractive or like counter to the advice that I just gave, right? To check Roblox out as like a money like an avenue to be more independent, right? It's not gonna be a money printing machine. No way. But I also do know that there are younger developers on there that they make their game, they get paid out in Roblox or Robux or whatever it's called, right? And then because they play Roblox themselves and they just remain in an ecosystem, instead of cashing it out, they put it back into the ecosystem, right? So a lot of from what I've heard, like there was a decent amount of people that got interviewed. They said that, yeah, I made like a decent amount of money, but before I cashed it out, right, like I converted it to real money, I spent it on like, I don't know, this really interesting like cosmetic that I wanted for the longest time, because they are Roblox players themselves, right? And that is also by design, right, from Roblox, because they know that if they put that step in between, there is always a decent percentage of people that are going to convert that to a cosmetic before they then cash it out, right? Like a company town. Hell yeah. It is weird. It is weird. Like that's the thing. Like if you start looking into Roblox and the way that they handle those things, right? It's, you know, the things that we don't like about like microtransaction, that it gets converted into like a currency that you don't understand, and then you have to do like conversions, and that's all done by design. But usually that doesn't happen when you are making those credits, right? You have to buy into those credits. However, Roblox is doing that the opposite way, right? Where you earn those credits, and then that doesn't really have like any real value, right? Because you don't really know what that is, especially not as a kid, which is still most of the target audience. And it'll just be like, I don't know what the value of that money is. I'm just gonna, I don't know, buy a cool hat, you know? I can't tell if this is awesome or like really dystopian. It is weird, right? I feel that a lot of it is on the nice edge, especially with games. And I feel this about games in general, you know? Because there's the slow encroachment of like microtransactions even in single player games, right? If you look at like Assassin's Creed, why do I need to buy a booster to boost me up to a final level in an Assassin's Creed game? Or like, why do I need to buy like, I don't know, cosmetics, right? Like it has no real point, at least in my opinion, because then you know that they made the content just purely to be sold, right? And sure, like games do need to make money, right? But I think this was so interesting. There was always a saying that those microtransactions don't affect the design. I think we are so far away from that being a reality now that there are games that have specific designs in them, or they work in a specific way to sell you more skins, right? It's just weird. If you think about, and this is my prime example of this, right? Ghost Recon Breakthrough or Breakpoint or whatever the game was called. Never played it, so I have no clue, right? But what I always found weird was that this was about a fantasy of you being on an island where you are alone and you're the sole survivor, right? That was sort of the fantasy that was set up for the game. Cool. Then why the hell does it have a social hub? Why can I go into a social hub and meet other people, right? It goes so counter that fantasy of me trying to survive on an island that it makes no sense. And then it becomes really, really hard to then not see that design choice and then be like, there must be some monetization behind it, you know? It becomes very difficult to like separate the two. And there's definitely more games that do that. And some games they manage to like merge the two things in like a very smooth way, right? I don't really agree with most of the stuff that they do on Fortnite either, because I'm a sucker for consistency in world building, right? So if I didn't see the people from like The Office like turn up in like a Fortnite game, that's not my cup of tea, right? But there's also an opposite angle where if it's gonna be a multiverse kind of thing, where at this point there's so much stuff in Fortnite already, like who the fuck cares if like the people from The Office are gonna be in it? You know, no one cares. Doesn't Roblox take a lot from your earnings if you try to cash it? I think they, well, again, I don't know, right? But I assume that they do take a portion of it. I deleted that game, especially for how good Wildlands was. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I think this is also a thing that is happening where how should I even, because something that was also in that report was that people are spending less and less time playing games because now there's so many other avenues. There was some really interesting research being done that a lot of, especially young males in America are switching over to like iCasinos or whatever, and like gambling and all that kind of stuff, which was really interesting to see. And I think it's also just because like games are, there's so much friction to get to the fun, and it kind of feels like we've set them up to go to a casino next, right? It feels like the stepping stone now, which is really fucked in my opinion. But yeah, it is interesting. But I think also when reading the whole document, right? One thing that I was also looking at was that maybe this is like a new era that we're stepping into, right? Where there's so much frustration with AAA games for such a long time, that now people are really looking at different games out there. And they lost trust with like the companies that they grew up with because they kept on releasing stuff that they didn't want to engage with. Whereas now you do have a choice, right? Like there's so much choice on the market, especially if you look at indie games, and there's some really good stuff out there. Like you can, yeah, that's the competition, right? And they called it like the attention economy, right? And that everyone was fighting for the attention. And that's where I think it comes down to, like, if you make like really good games that like really immerse you into the sort of fantasy that you're trying to set up, which by the way, I think has to be more creative driven than business driven. If we get back to that, right? And then trying to make stuff at scale, I think that we might be back on track. But yeah, I think that's going to be a while before we see, I don't know, especially the Western AAA stuff, latching onto that, I think. Again, because of financial pressures and stuff too, right? But it's interesting. It's interesting to go through a report because I have lots of thoughts about it. And I think I have to digest some of them before I can really make up my mind about it. But yeah. It is interesting. So what I would take from that is, as an individual artist, right? Like what I would take from that is that outsourcing codev is becoming more and more and more popular. So that means stop looking at like the big AAA companies if you want to get a job in the future, right? You can still do that and you can still have those ambitions, but it becomes more and more feasible to actually just work for a smaller or relatively big sized outsource or codev studio, right? I think that's like a very, very reliable path to take, which is interesting. It's probably gonna be even more of a case if you work in, let's say, Asiatic countries, right? I would assume that there's gonna be more outsource studios there. Well, basically more affordable labor countries. I don't know what the best way to say this is, but that's where a lot of those companies are going, right? Lex is saying, I think we're currently at a turning point where we can take a share of the market from the big companies, but it won't be easy. I don't think we can immediately take a share from the big companies, because the people that are still invested in the big companies, they're gonna either stay engaged or erode over time. Because I think this is also like in the presentation that we just had a look at, 30% of people's attention is still gonna go through the 5 top played games, right? Like your Call of Duties and all that kind of stuff. That's still like at least 30% of where people spend their time, right? And then you have the next 10 games, and then you have like the rest of the games. So basically it's your 1% is those 5 games, your next 5% is those other games, and then there's like literally the rest, including indies and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I think to the degree that I agree with you is that there is so much financial pressure on AAA companies now that the games that they want to create, there's just less and less budget for them, right? That's why we're seeing the layoffs. That's why also we're seeing spins to different art styles and different ways of working. More codev focused, or spinning up like different projects that don't take like 5 years to make but have like a different art style because that's cheaper to produce. Like all those things are happening right now, right? But the downside is that like a AAA studio always takes more time, right? Especially if you want to make like the big bug games. So yeah, second point I would say is that there are opportunities out there. And sometimes it makes sense to see if there's ways that the art that you make, and this is something that I believe in thoroughly, that the art that you make has a commercial viability by itself, right? So let's say you're just making your ArtStation portfolio. Why not try and sell some of those things that you made, right? Whether it is on Gumroad or ArtStation or, I don't know, like the Unreal Engine Marketplace, I guess Fab now, you know, like there's opportunities out there that you can explore to be a bit more self-sustainable and a bit more independent. Because also, even if it doesn't really work out in your favor, you're gonna learn more than just, hey, look, I published this thing for my portfolio, you know? You're gonna get to grips with the business side of things, and that's also gonna make you better in negotiating for the future. I don't know, more self-secure about like going into negotiations with your current boss or something like that, right? Like it has a lot of knock-on effects that we thoroughly still underestimate. So yeah, I would definitely say look into those. Hello, Jeremiah. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm doing good. I wonder if it's viable to move there. Thailand was very nice. I know people who live there in Vietnam. Yeah. I mean, it is viable if that is what you're into, right? If that is a thing that you want to do. Yeah, of course it's going to be viable. I think if you look at it from like a financial perspective, right? If you get, and this is going to go more into like economics, right? But like let's say you get a job for a remote company in the UK and they allow you to like work from anywhere, right? That money that you're going to be making in Vietnam or in Thailand is going to last way longer than it does in the UK, right? And you can do the same thing working for an American company in the UK, for example, right? Because the wages are going to be there. Now, is that going to be tough? Is it going to be tough to get that gig? Yes. Do you need to be good? Yes. Do you need to be dependable? Yes. But it is possible. I got an honest $28 from my fab last year. At least it's something. At least it's something, you know? It's better than nothing. And I think it showed you, like, okay, there is potential here. Like, I still remember making my first income. And it was like, wait, I can do this? Like, I can just, instead of just only making it for ArtStation, I can also put it on this? Like, it's cool. Let's go, Wednesday. Yeah, let's go. We should actually do that. Right. Let me switch on over. Let's dive into some feedback. As I said before, we're going to be blasting a little bit through it today, but feel free to raise your hand if you are here, and we'll start with you. Slate is first, Powertail second, Crowdy is third, and then Gal is fourth. Okay, let's have a look. So, Slate, let's start with you. Let me see where you win the list. Yep. You had the hand right there, but lag. Let's see. Let me organize my windows here. All right. So, took your advice with the texturing, finished and retextured all the roof objects, including the roof trims, and I need your opinion. Any suggestions or improvements, or should I leave them? I think it's looking good so far. What I would do is also look into more broad gradients, right? But this is something that you can do later. And what I mean with that is, you have some like really nice dirt. What I want to see is some like a blending that goes from like the bottom to the top, right? So that's what I would do, and you can apply that literally anywhere. You can literally do that here. You can have like leaks and all that kind of stuff. This is going to be more decals, right? But that's the main thing that I would do now. But this is looking good. Looking really good as a base texture. I would keep on building on it. As in, I would do the rest of the environment, keep on building on it, and then circle back at a later date and really polish it up, right? Because we don't want to spend like a bunch of time here at this point, because then we're not getting traction on the environment, right? But it looks really good so far. So that's cool. How should I approach glass? I've never touched any glass materials. Are they textured in Painter? Or is it an Unreal Engine shader? The glass will be attached to the window frames. So my knowledge of glass is like really outdated, even though I wrote like a glass shader material like tutorial in Unreal Engine 4. But yeah, it is still going to be a material, like a shader in Unreal actually. And then you can input texture maps into it to have like roughness variation, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would look into it. I would start with the just base material and then see if you can go on top of it, right? So I would start out with the base layer. We'll start with the base, which is your shader, and then do your details or your roughness variation on top of it with your texture. But I would get the base shape, the base texture, the base shader set up first, because then it becomes like easier to add things on top of it. Right, cool. Thank you, Slate. Nice and quick. We're gonna move on to the next person. Looking good, looking good. Last thing that I'll say, if you want to have a look at what an old abandoned place looks like, there's Let me see if I spell this right. Teufelsberg. So this is Devil's Mountain. Look that up, and you're gonna find some really cool like radar domes that are like damaged and worn and all that kind of stuff. That's gonna be really cool to see. I went there myself when I lived there. It was cool. Right. Cool. Thanks again, Slate. Cool to see your work. And next up, we have Power Tail. Let's have a look. No notes, but let's have a look. There's also an issue with shadow with the glass, I think. I think you can have translucent shadows and all that kind of stuff. You just have to go to like a bunch of specific settings. I think you might have to set your shadows to be like per pixel or something like that. There is options there for sure. Cool. Next up, Power Tail. Let's have a look. Oh, we didn't have like a live thingy go out again. Dang it, stupid announcements. Anyway, what's the best direction in terms of what looks best for the scene regarding the concern above, or is it better to just go with generic rocks or stone? Okay, let's see. So the main question for this week is about the middle half wall for the stairs. I like the idea of making them change from the concept, maybe adding some capping on top. When doing some research, I found commonly used methods and shapes for this stuff. I'm kind of confused on what direction to go with. Okay, so how to pick a direction? Honestly, I'm going to give you the really easy tip, right? So what direction to pick? First thing to try. What looks cool, right? The rule of cool. If you think that like one stands out because it's cooler than the rest of it, I would start there. If you don't know what to do with that one, then I think it's time to block them out. Really quickly throw them in the scene. You could even just make like one of them, right? Like make it an asset. Scatter it on top of here, and then just replace the asset. You know, so that you're just overriding the same FBX so that you can have some quick iterations. But I would say block them out. Whenever, and this is something that I repeat often, but it's worth saying, whenever you think like, hey, I don't know what to go with, you have to keep momentum, right? Throw it in the scene. You have to get your ideas from in your head onto paper, because that is going to give you a better insight on where you need to go with next steps, right? Because the more that we get into our heads, the more that we just keep spinning, you know? So we need to block them out and get them in the scene. Right. Let's see. So there's a couple of variations here. We've got like the more broken up ones, right? The one that I would pick is probably something like this, just because of the reasons that they're like broken up. And that means that in this case, they fit the scene better. Because anything like this is too clean. Right, so that's too clean. This is mossy. This mossy stuff could work if, for example, if we're on the side of like, on the side of like a shipyard or something like that, right? If we want to have some like really interesting mossy stuff, this is the way that I would go. But we are just in like the back alley somewhere, so I would try to lean more into like broken, cobbled together stuff. I'm almost imagining that this is just like the stones that they took from another district in the city and they just like salvaged what they could and they made like their own staircase with it, right? That's more the way that I see them. So try to align them with the story or the setting. So yeah, that's why this one is my favorite out of these choices, right? Cool. Let's have a look. Check rocks and stones for a little. First time is saying, I still think that there isn't a corridor along the stairs. If we check the concept, there's a transition between the stairs and the wall. Also, there's a second beam that carries the baskets. Yeah, I also think so. But like, this is almost like a little bit more optional, right? If Powertail wants to add like this little corridor here, I think that's okay. I think it could actually be interesting to kind of have some like light coming from here too. But then it's like, okay, what do we do with this, right? Because now we made a space and it is taking up like a sizable proportion, like a sizable portion here, right? Because we are trying to flow the view here. So you are going to pass here. So this needs to be somewhat important too, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, thanks, Powertail. Appreciate it. Next person, Charlie. Let's have a look. No notes yet. Charlie is working on Jomon Golem. Thanks for noting. No worries. No worries. And yeah, thanks for sharing that additional bit of feedback as well, Rustam. So Charlie's asking, I used two different techniques for the rocks. One was using the technique you suggested, using displacement map for the cliffs, and the other one was just old school sculpting and geonodes to get the shape. Sculpting definitely isn't my strong suit, but I feel like this is good enough for the first pass. Wait, what are we looking at? Are we looking at the cliff in the background? Oh, that was not even a question. Any question on the stuff I've done so far? And what are the highest priority things to focus on next? I want to start wrapping this project up soon and focus on the smaller one. So, I mean, we said this a couple of times, right? There's a big issue here with keep getting distracted with like stuff that doesn't matter to the focal point, right? I know that that's like very direct that I'm saying it, but we've gone through this a couple of times already. The focus is here, right? You finished the rest of the scene before focusing the focal point of the scene, right? That's what the highest priority is. So your focal point is your highest priority, right? Always. Because technically, without your focal point, right? The most important point in your scene, if that's not done, or you're saying like, hey, look, I'm not going to finish the scene, you're screwed, right? Because you don't have anything to like pull the attention towards. So that is definitely your highest priority. Calypso's displacement, small rocks is sculpt. Yeah. I would say, honestly, most of these small rocks, they look fine, right? They look fine. I think I would definitely think about big, medium, small. We are going to be talking about that in just a little bit with John's work as well. So we might just jump on that straight after this. So big, medium, small, which means that you have like a big shape, a smaller shape next to it, and then some like small pebbles, right? Basically what we're doing is we're making mini compositions. Make it look like really interesting. And then you can add some like foliage growing between it, and it becomes like really nice to look at, just as like a piece by itself, right? And it becomes also like a bit more organized as well, in terms of like where you're trying to pull the attention from this entire angle, right? I will say that these assets are being used in another game, which is why there's some extra focus. But I do understand and agree that scope and scope/focus is an issue for me for sure. In that case, if you are using those assets for that other game, I wonder why it might make sense to just like make cool stuff in that game then and make environments there instead of trying to hit two birds with like one stone with two different scenes, right? I don't know. It feels weird that we're trying to make stuff for like two scenes at once, because then I feel like you're trying to balance it for two things at the same time, which usually is not a good idea, right? Cool, but there was another question, right? So any feedback on the stuff I've done so far? I think the biggest feedback that I still have is can still go back to like a couple of weeks ago, right? Focus on the focal point. That's still the biggest thing that I want to see, and that hasn't really changed. It is and I think an overpaint that I've done like a couple of weeks ago still holds strong to this day, right? Because you did focus a lot of your attention and time to the waterfall and the rocks and all that kind of stuff in the background, which is good, right? Those things need to happen. Maybe the prioritization was a bit wrong, but what also happened in the same spot is that now I say that the focus point is here, but visually it is not, right? It is here. Like the waterfall is definitely the main focal point now. So now the question is, okay, how do we then shift the focal point back? And we can do that in multiple ways, right? But it basically comes down to trying to obscure more of the background and put more of the attention more on the foreground then again, right? Because we want the statue to be the center of attention, right? And then we want to turn that into like a really nice narrative piece where like maybe there's like a little shrine that they put like, I don't know, like a couple trinkets. So maybe there's like sacrifices for the golem here or something like that. And this becomes like the focal point of the scene, right? Yeah. There's options here. Yeah, it's putting the focus where it needs to be, right? Because honestly, like the rest of the scene, the background looks decent with your stones and like all the texture that you've made so far. You can make it look really nice if you spend like some more time like properly set dressing it, and you know, like that's gonna be fine at this point. We need to do some more work, but that's fine. We want to focus on the focal point first. Yeah, like I said, I think the rocks look pretty nice. Make sure to keep the big, medium, small stuff in mind, because that's going to help a lot. And yeah, see those different elements as individual compositions. That's going to be really, really helpful. And maybe another thing that I'll say is this space, right? If you're going to add, let me use some other colors. If you're going to add a bunch of stuff here, then we probably want to add less stuff around it. Because this is the area for detail. But if we surround that with an area of rest right next to it, that is going to put the extra focus on the attention to detail. So don't try to like flood the scene around your focal point, because we need to give it some space to breathe, right, and stand by itself. But yeah, that's it. Thanks, Charlie. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. And then I was saying that we're gonna jump over to John's work, because we actually have something like very relevant here. I'm talking about the clustering of assets. The same thing happened here, right? I'm gonna read your questions in just a second, John. But the main thing that I wanted to bring forward is thinking about the same thing, right? Like clustering your assets, thinking about the big, medium, small clusters and like how you can make them stand out. Because something like this looks very pleasing to the eye. We have big shape, we have some medium shapes, we have a small shape, and there's like some detail shapes next to it, right? It's very pleasing that becomes like a composition that can stand on its own 2 feet, right? So this is really interesting to look at. So from like a shape language wise, we can just break this down into, you know, big, medium, and then small stuff, right? And that's literally, whenever I do set dressing in my professional work, that is, most of the work goes into trying to do this with a variety of assets, right? Because it always just looks better. For example, here, right, in your main composition, this is the way that it's currently looking now. What is happening is that it goes from a big shape into a flat landscape, and then you have some like grass that kind of is sticking through a rock, right? Doesn't make sense. So the way to clean that up is then we keep the big shape, which is good. I like it. Then we add like a smaller shape next to it. And then we add some like smaller pebbles. And then where you can't really see because the shapes are kind of like obscuring each other and all that kind of stuff, that's where we are very specific with our grass placement, right? So really scale it in a way that is almost like sticking between some of the cracks. And that stuff, that is attention to detail. If I see you caring about an individual grass tuft sticking out in your detail shot in between like some cracks between rocks, that's the juicy stuff, right? That's what I want to see. So that attention to detail, especially if you pick a couple of areas where you're going to be like, hey, look, I know that's where the focus is going to go towards, so I'm going to pay a little bit of extra attention to those areas, then that is going to be worth it, right? Usually, if I just thinking on the top of my head, usually where you want to put your attention is transition between surfaces, right? So going from a wall to a floor, going from like a big shape to a smaller shape, anything like that, that can deserve your attention. And then anything surrounding the focal point, right? So we know that anyone is going to be looking here. So this sort of stuff needs to be very purposely done, right? Like all these grass tufts, like again, just like have them come out like a couple of pebbles here and there, you know? And then do the same thing here. Have like a medium pebble, some like smaller pebbles, maybe there's some grass peeking behind it. And really spend some extra time getting some of this stuff to look extra nice, you know? And that's it. That's it on clustering assets at least. Let me see if there were some extra questions from your side, John, and then we'll move back to the queue. See, I was saying that felt passive aggressive, but it wasn't meant to be. No, I get it. You got to keep me straight, you know? You got to keep me on my toes. I did say that we were gonna spend less time today on Whip Wednesday, and then I spent like an hour talking about like a random document that I found online. So it's good. You got to keep me honest. Let's see, John. Need to enter the project now? Just some final feedback to push it before posting. I've added everything you said last time. Is there anything else? Would it be okay if there's 2 screenshots, a video, and then a breakdown? Or should I find a third screenshot? No. You are never adding anything to your portfolio just because you think that you need like a certain number, right? Whenever you add something to your portfolio, it needs to be because you think it can stand on its own 2 feet, even compared to some of the other pieces on your portfolio, right? So we're never just adding anything to your portfolio just for the sake of hitting a number. That's not gonna work. So if these are like the 2 shots that you want to go with, cool. Spend extra time refining some of the stuff that we said, right? Like really try to cluster those things up, really go into the details, especially focusing on the foreground, right? And it is sometimes very small stuff, right? Like, why is there a pebble on this rock? Why is this pebble here? Like, maybe it makes more sense to have them here again. Maybe there's like a little grass tuft here. It's that kind of stuff, right? If we're doing stuff in the foreground, are there things that we can do to really push this to the next level? and really put in like the small bits, small details, because that's gonna work. Cool. Right, thanks, John. Let's have a look. Who is next in line then? So we got Partel, Charlie, Galazar. Stefan is saying the tree branch instead of pebbles could work as well. Yep. That's why I'm keeping it super high level. Whatever you replace your big, medium, small with can work, right? I will bring up the example here because I didn't even talk about this. This big, medium, small is just the wheel is the big chunk. You add like a stone next to it, and you know you add like a big stone here, and then you add like a couple of pebbles next to it. Cool. That's your big, medium, small. The content of the big, medium, small doesn't matter, right? As long as you do the different steps, because that just always looks nicer. But yeah, a tree branch, I don't know, whatever you can come up with, right? Especially at this stage of the project, you probably want to save yourself a bunch of time and focus on things that are like really easy to make. So yeah, so like this can definitely work. Right, who was next then? I think we had Galazar next. Right. A couple of notes that I've pinned down already. So let's have a look. Stone textures. I want to hear some feedbacks about the colors and the roughness, if I can improve the stones more. I'm trying to aim for semi-stylized. Okay. The first thing that I'll say is semi-stylized is such a broad range, right? So for next time, if you want to give me like, hey, look, I am aiming for Overwatch. I don't know, I'm just saying something, right? That is like way more specific and way more helpful to have as a part of your feedback request, right? So let's make a note of that. We're not really gonna be talking that style specific anyway, because to a certain degree, don't really care about those specifics necessarily, right? Yeah, an example for next time would be nice. Hey, Mohammed, thank you so much for the little tip there. I appreciate it. Yeah, I love sharing these tips. So, yeah, if you got any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. Right, back to Galazar. So, the roughness in the base color, you know? So, we're looking at the roughness here. First, let's start with the roughness. I think it is pretty generic, right? Think about the context, right? The context of the asset and how it is going to be used in the scene. For example, if this is the way that you're trying to replicate it, right? Let's say the bottom, there's always going to be a gradient going from the bottom to the top in terms of like dirt, right? Because the bottom section is always going to be dirtier than the top section, right? Just because dirt flies around, I'm stomping my feet, all that kind of stuff. So putting that gradient in here is a great start. Then also think about the context of where it is going to be interacting with the rest of the wall, right? So some of the stones that stick out, for example, they are going to be a little bit more shiny because people are like bumping into it, and I don't know, there's going to be a car bumping into it, a person bumping into it. It's going to be more exposed to wind. So the stones that stick out are shinier, right? So shiny stones stick out. Those are some tips to help already. I think that should be good. Oh, the last thing that I'll say is context. If you're gonna add cracks, right? Think what that does to the roughness information. So shiny or dull, right? It's more about thinking, okay, if there's going to be like a split in the rock, is that going to be shiny or is that going to be dull, right? Because there's probably going to be dirt that's going to go in it. It's harder to clean, all that kind of stuff. It's probably going to be duller than any of the other surfaces, right? So yeah, that's something good to think about as well. And the same can be translated to your base color too. I think your base color is a good start. I think you're highlighting some of the edges nicely. This is more dependent on your style, right? But I think this is a good start. And again, think about context, right? That same context that we talked about for the roughness, think about that too when it comes to the base color, because it translates between the two. Right. The bigger thing though is when you look at some of the silhouettes here, I think they look pretty interesting. I would say you can drive your silhouettes to be more interesting than they are now, right? And this is going to come down to your cracks again, right? So if you have a crack, and especially with stylized work, right? We're gonna really change up the silhouette here. But this is the sort of stuff that I want to see, right? Changing up your silhouette. Doing the same thing all the places that you have cracks, right? Instead of having this as like a nice crack, maybe this is just like a chip that came off of it, you know? So it goes like, whoop, it goes like inside again. But mainly what I want to see is that instead of these like nice little shapes, I want to see some shapes that are just like, oh, this is like a little bit of a rough shape. Cool. Okay, and then this one can be normal. This one can be normal. That's fine. But we can see the same thing here as well. Like, sure, some of them are like very squarish, but there are some like interesting little separations happening in the silhouette, and there's more use of 3D, right? There's depth, there's chips, and it all has an effect on the silhouette. So that's why I would say to, especially if you're embedding cracks, right? Like, think about how that works within stone. So this means looking up references, right? Find some interesting references about stone walls with like broken stones in them, right? And then showcase that you use that reference and really make it the coolest little bit that you can make it. But yeah, that's what I would say. And then the rest of it is going to be more dependent on your style choice, right? So if you're going to go semi-stylized, I can't really give like any sort of feedback on that specifically because that is very style dependent. So feel free to share an example of it next time, and then we can have a specific look at what is happening there. Cool. Thank you, Galazar. Next up, we got Senkai. Are you not in this list again? You should be. I definitely saw your work. Let's have a look. Let me get you in here. Hold on. Give me a sec. Oh, interesting. Let's copy the image again. Paste it in here. Will do, thanks. No worries, happy to help. I'm trying to understand what workflows I'll be using for this project. I've decided that the wooden beams, floor, walls, and ceiling will be modular tiling assets using a 1K textile density on a 4x4 decimated geo. I'm thinking of using the same scope for both the walls, to create the blue peeling paint on the walls. And unique damages and color variation on the bigger surfaces. I plan to use a layer shader in Unreal. As for all the other props, I see them as hero prop symbol, making them all unique. Also, the pipes can be modular tiling assets. Pipes? Oh, those pipes. Yeah. I mean, that's just like a simple trim sheet that you just map some geo on. A trim or a tileable. Yep, but I haven't figured out what to use yet. I like to make this product stand out as much as possible to recruiters with the hope of getting my first job through it. Will this be enough technical understanding to show? Oh, okay. So you're not thinking about it functionality-wise. You're thinking about what you need to show for a recruiter. So here's the thing. You don't want to jam in a bunch of workflows in your work to just showcase that you can do them to a recruiter. What you want to be doing is you want to pick a concept that you then break down into workflows that are required for the scene, right? So at this point, like the workflow that you're going to be using, if you think that that's the most effective workflow, that's the workflow that you're going to use, right? We don't want to jam in workflows just to make sense of it. But I think your workflows make sense. Just made a geo. You could even modular tiling assets. Thinking about like the wooden beams, right? For 4 meter. Yeah, you could sculpt them with 4 meter. But these are going to be like relatively flat though, right? Because they're painted. I don't know. Or if you're going to exaggerate the way that they look, maybe that would be cool. But honestly, you can almost just use like a trim on some of these because they are like relatively flat, right? But yeah, I mean, that sounds good. Got nothing really to add here. Pipes on the walls. I don't think I'll be adding those black pipes. On the walls? Oh, those. Didn't even see them. You're not going to add those black pipes? Why not? Honestly, the reason why I asked why not is because that is where the weirdness of this environment comes from, you know? It's like, wait, what the hell are they doing here? You know? Like, I'm asking like, what are they doing here? This is so weird and so, I don't know, so weird. This is almost what makes it like Resident Evil-y, you know, in that sense. So I would definitely keep them though. Because this is story stuff. Plus it's easy to make it. So those pipes didn't make sense to me. Well, it's more like maybe it doesn't make sense in a way where it's not logical, but this is also not a house that is built by logical people, right? Because if I start reading into it, so there's gross stuff here. There's gross stuff in the sink. The freaking windows are boarded up. Like the chair fell on the floor. This is not a normal house. This is not a logical place where people live and happily have a life, right? There's some fucked up stuff going on here. And then with this, we are sort of getting a hint at like what weird concoction they're doing. Because that's why I'm like, wait, what? What the hell are they doing? And sure, we don't really get an answer to that question, but it is still an intriguing question to ask, right? But yeah, that's beside the point. I would say the workflows do make sense. Plan to use a layer shader in Unreal. I mean, yeah, I don't really mind. You can easily get away with just like normal vertex paint there, with just like your traditional material layering. If you want to use a layered shader, that's totally fine. When it comes to very, very specific pipeline things, right? Like let's say, for example, the layered shader. A lot of companies are going to have like their own spin on it anyway, right? So yeah, I think the more fundamental things like showcasing how to use trim sheets, tileables, how to make props, like how to sculpt something, those things are going to be more relevant than you showing off that you can plug it all into like a layered shader, if that makes sense, right? So that's more optional to me. Yeah. Fine is solid, so layer shader is more optional. But it could still be fun to play around with, right? I'm not against it, but yeah, that's just what I'm thinking. And then the beams. Beams could potentially be a trim sheet, but that's more up to you. I think if you are gonna sculpt them, the one thing that I'll say is make them like curvy and broken up and all that kind of stuff, right? Like make them like really old beams, because that is gonna be more interesting to look at rather than just a flat piece of geo that you sculpted on. So what I'm trying to say is really make use of the workflow that you're gonna be using, right? You've already made the beams. I want to exaggerate the shapes. That's great. That is lovely. Yeah, sounds good. Hey, Notes. Thank you for subbing. I appreciate it. Always appreciate the support. Cool. Okay. So that's gonna be it. Thank you, Sinkai. Let's have a look. Thanks for the feedback. No worries. Thank you for sharing your work. Next one is TopG. Let's have a look. Right. So you've got a bunch of additional shots, right? And you were wondering about the composition. I took a quick stab at it already, but let's see if we can read into some context. I want to get your point of view on the composition of the shots attached. Most of them are very rough, but I wanted to share what I had in mind of the scene. I'm trying to see what shots to add on top of the existing one or to remove what I have. So I don't think this is going to be a surprise necessarily, right? I would still focus just on the main topic, you know, on the main focal point. That's basically anything else is going to be additional. But if we are going to have a look at some of these additional shots, then let's go through them. I approved, quote unquote, these two. Right, so this one is approved, and then this one is approved. We've got two with a question mark, because I think this one can work, but it needs more work, right? It needs something in the scene. And then this one is more like, sure, but it has the caveat of having like the extra wall there, right? But from the two that I approved, quote unquote, the thing that I find interesting about them is that they are showing me something about the story, right? That is why this one has potential. But with this one, for example, I have no clue what I'm supposed to be looking at, right? If we look at this in isolation, this is just like a random hallway with a fountain at the back of it. I'm not really getting the impact from this. Same thing here. You know, this could potentially be like an interesting shot to kind of showcase some additional elements in the scene. But I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see how it looks in the end, right? I think also the reason why I don't like this one is because it is flat, right? This is just, in my opinion, it's a very boring angle. But this is me personally. I don't like those flat angles, right? I will always try to angle the camera to make it seem a bit more dynamic. That's where something like this is a bit more interesting than something like this. And then the fountain, I think this fountain is just more like, hey, I'm gonna make this cool thing, so here's a camera to showcase that, right? But it's not that interesting to. It's not that interesting to the story. Is what I'm trying to say, I think. Because then maybe moving this to the side and almost having a screenshot like this, not like this completely, but that the fountain is more like a foreground element that we can then see through like the rest of the scene, right? But it's almost like, okay, we have this thing, and then you kind of see that like I don't know, this is chained up or something like that. So I can ask questions. Where this is just more a showcase for an asset. And then the same thing for this one as well. Yeah, the other ones are good. The other ones are good. That's the way that I would look at it anyway. Because this by itself is intriguing. Right? I like that one. This one has potential as well because again, we're seeing something happening here, right? That's why those two have potential. Where some of the other ones, I guess those three have potential. Where some of the other ones, they need some more work. Makes sense. This gets me thinking about putting more purpose for the storytelling. Yeah, exactly. And it again comes down to this idea that like whatever you add to your portfolio needs to stand on its own 2 feet, right? Imagine that you have your main shot, which is the money shot. Almost all the stuff that you put below it needs to be close to as engaging as the main one, right? Either it adds additional layering to the story, which is what I'm focusing here, right? Or it just needs to, I don't know, it needs to be so well composed that it kind of like wows you from just like, yeah, the execution of it, right? Or the scale of it or something. But yeah, that's why I focus so much on story, because that is the stuff that like, that you want to see, right? Like in a portfolio, to work in the games industry, most of the stuff that I'm doing now, I would say most of the stuff that I'm doing now is either functionality driven, right? So it needs to have a purpose because the player needs to see what the hell they need to see, right? So set dressing to support guiding a player somewhere, right? Which is composition and set dressing and all that. But also, like a lot of it is also set dressing for mini stories, right? It's like, hey, look, this person put like a hidden treasure somewhere. Like I want you to go in and come up with a story that makes sense for this location, for this thing, right? Like that is a lot of our job, is that we need to either embed that into the logic of the space, or we need to do some additional storytelling on top of it. Yeah, infuse it with as much as you can. Cool. And then also, you said that you asked your mentor about it more in detail, right? This is in regards to like this screenshot, basically, with like the whole section to the right. And he said that pretty much it feels that a lot of students are making film sets instead of game environments. So he wanted me to do the 3 sides to make it feel more like a game environment, which I can agree with. I can definitely see that stands. I would then say, if that is the goal, try to over-deliver on that goal, right? Because I think there's a lot of value in what your mentor said there. But then it's like, okay, how do we actually make a good game environment? Like imagine, strip away all your previous thoughts, right? Let's say that this is a shot from the new Last of Us, right? How do you then put in some gameplay relevant stuff, right? Showcasing where to go next, why it's important, all those kind of things, right? Like you can build that in. But then I don't think necessarily adding like another wall helps a lot, right? I think it's doing that with a purpose is where the real value comes from. If you can then tell me, for example, I don't know, how would we do that, right? Like, for example, right now, your goal seems to be very much focused on this, right? Like showcasing that you can go there. Because if we're being honest, this looks pretty much blocked off. So what if instead we gamify it even more and we say like, hey, look, your goal is to escape because you're getting followed by like a bunch of zombies, right? Sure, we're going really stereotypical, but let's roll with it, right? How do I then make sure that a player knows that they need to go there and that they know that they can't go to other places, right? Because for example, we have like this little suitcase here, but if we pile up more stuff here, then that becomes immediately clear that this is like not navigable, right? Or like we can't go there. We can do that here as well. Like put a chain around this. Maybe have like, I don't know, some additional support elements, just like barricading it off just a little bit. And then you can kind of clear the path for the rest of it. Kind of annoying that this like fountain is in the way. Right, but that is a way that you could do that. You could then actually think about moving the fountain just a little bit more out of the way, so that area becomes more clear. Right, but then we're taking it up a notch and we're saying, okay, this is no longer just art. We are also influencing the level design. To your point, Stefan, I'll get to that question in a bit. But now we're also thinking where the gameplay and the art meet, right? Which is also part of our job. I was worried it blocks the cellar. It made me hesitant. But that's also a good indication. Is the focus the cellar or the alleyway behind it? Because if we want to focus here, then it might make more sense to like... Well, first of all, then it might make more sense to put like some visual blocker here so that the focus becomes more here. Or we do something else, right? Because if the focus is a cellar, then that is not what I'm currently seeing. Stefan is asking, if you were working in the studio, the level designer would already do this for you, right? Sometimes, yeah. But the reason why I'm saying all of this is because in a lot of cases, this tiny stuff that I'm doing now is basically the barrier between you and a level designer, right? Because what you bring to the table is you bring a keen eye for composition and how to pull a player's attention into the right direction, right? Whereas a level designer is oftentimes more worried about the functionality of what this space is going to be used for, right? So let's say combat, let's say it's a transition space, let's say it's a traversal space, whatever, right? So oftentimes there is like a dialogue between you and the level designer where you can lend a hand in like visually supporting the goals that they have for the space, right? So if this is a chase sequence, as a level designer, you would probably not want to block the player's path by putting a fountain in the middle, right? Because that wouldn't make sense. Now, sometimes that can happen, right? And then we have to like dress around it. Like we can make it seem like, hey, look, this is not something that you can crawl over or on top of. You have to go around it, right? And then we can support that with art. Cool. Thank you, Tobji. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really thinking about doing like a full... I have some topics in mind that I want to talk about in the future. Especially on the overlap between level design and level art. I think there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about there. But let's keep moving on. So next person we have Lily. Hello, Lily. Unknown island. Question. Should I create a wooden trim sheet or texture for all the wood elements in my scene and texture everything separately? Which wood do you have? Oh, this stuff? Nah, you can easily make like a kit or a trim sheet out of it. If you're going stylized, honestly, I'm more inclined to go with a kit. So I would go with a kit, which is basically you sculpt, I don't know, you sculpt like a couple of planks, a couple of poles from different sizes. What else do you need? Yeah, you basically get the point, right? A couple of poles, a couple of planks. Say 4 planks, different sizes, different finish. You know, you got a broken plank, you got 2 complete ones. And then you basically add all of this to a single texture atlas, right? So let's say in this case, I don't know, you use a 4K map or something like that, depends on your textile density. And then you just like map everything on here, you know? But the reason why we're doing this is because with this sort of approach, we can really focus on nice silhouettes, unique sculpted detail, and it's going to look better, right? If you look at something with a trim sheet, it's always going to be tricky to make that look like really nice and organic, right? Whereas if you just go in and sculpt and you do it that way, and then you make a kit out of it, that is going to look like way better. Cool. Second question, any other feedback in the scene that I should adjust or need more work? I'm not super satisfied yet with the roof huts, so I will keep adjusting that. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely way better than before, right? I definitely can see that they need some improvement. But I think the improvement is more in terms of how you add the layers, right? So what you want to do is, if you look at it from like a side view, it's almost like this is your first layer, and then you have like your second layer, and then your third layer, right? So that basically means that we can never have just like one thing sticking out. It's always going to be, well, even this one can already be more curvy. And then you have like another layer that's kind of like sticking below it. And then you have like, I don't know, maybe like a random individual thing sticking out from the top of it, right? And that is going to give us more interesting layering compared to trying to achieve it with like a single layer on top of it, right? And if we then do that on like everything, I think that's going to look like really good. But also, yeah, so improve layers. Bend all the cards, right? Bending is going to be really helpful. And yeah, try to accentuate the silhouette more, right? Really play with it, because we're still seeing the hut below it, right? What you probably want to do is even the base you want to kind of model like this, and then you build like everything else on top of it, right? And then sometimes I'm seeing some cool shapes here. What you could do with, for example, this is you have the top of the hut coming down like this, and then you have like a rope, and then you have something like this, right? But it becomes like way more expressive compared to something that is just, I mean, I'm simplifying it, right? It's like you want to feel the tension of those individual layers, right? So wherever you have like a layer here, this is where the most tension is going to be, right? Because this is wrapping everything together. And then you can just be like, okay, so that means that from this point on, this is going to be bulging outwards. You can do it that way, or you can bulge it inwards as well. This is really exaggerated, right? But this silhouette, way more expressive than what you had before, right? Cool. Hey, Galazar. Thank you. Have a good night. Will do. It's a little bit tricky. Yeah, thatch roofing is not easy. It's not easy. The background hut is floating. Good catch, Cameron. A little detail, but yeah, thatch roofs are not easy. But yeah, think about layering, right? So if we were to condense this, you want to have layering, you want to have tension, you want to exaggerate your silhouettes. There was a fourth one that I can't think of. Layering and bending, right? Those are going to be really important. If you're not using it yet, soft selection is really helpful for something like this. especially when you make your base shape first, you have your layering all correct, and then you just go in with soft selection and you just like bulge it out and all that kind of stuff. You can easily do that at the end and make it way more interesting to look at. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Thank you, Lily. Appreciate it. Oh, I like the little hangman in the foreground. That's looking cool. Is that a hangman? Is that like a fishing? Oh, sorry, I misread that. I thought it was like a I don't know. Is that what you say it in English? Like a hangmat? I like butchered that. A hangmat? Anyway, let's keep on moving. Cool, cool, cool. So, Senkai, Lily, Cameron and Liz. I'm sure a hammock. That's it. Thank you, Dobji. Hangmat. Oh my god. Let's see. We lost track here. Who are you looking at now? Cameron. Cool. Where are you in the list? I know I've seen your name. Oh no, there you are. There you are. Right, Cameron. Back with another update. Cool to see. By the way, I just want to say I appreciate all the support, people. There's a bunch of people watching this week. I really appreciate it. But yeah, thank you for all the support. Let's see. Cameron is quite happy with the progress I've made over the last week. However, I'm having issues with rendering. Okay. Any general feedback? I think the feedback from last week still stands and therefore needs to continue worked on before asking more specific questions. I think that's fine. I think then I don't really have like any general feedback at this point yet, right? The only thing that I might say here is about the rain, right? Because the only thing that I have to say there is think about the impact on the mood of the scene, right? I think because rain oftentimes has a depressive or like sad effect, right? Whereas something like snow or frost has more like a cozy vibe, right? At least to me it does. Even more so. I think rain could also be cozy in a way too, but it feels, at least to me, it feels like it's more on the sad spectrum than the cozy spectrum. Cool. And in the second image, Path Racer, the record player doesn't seem to be showing the properly baked textures. In that the corners look really jagged. What have I changed that could be causing this? It was working properly other than the noise, but I can't seem to get it back to where it was. Oh, the second image. Is that the one that I'm looking at now? It is not. So we're looking at this image instead. Oh, that. I've got no idea. I honestly have no clue, Cameron. Because you did do it with Path Racer. I've never used Path Racer in Unreal. Also, one thing to keep in mind, I know that you want to go for like super realistic and all that kind of stuff. Path Racer is not usable in games, right? So if you want to have this as a game appropriate scene, I would probably avoid Path Racer and just try to make it look as good with like any other rendering engine. Just use, you can just use Lumen, honestly. Sometimes you get too fancy with these rendering techniques. But yeah, I have no clue what could be causing that. I did see it. I did see what you wanted to point out, but I have no clue. I would say throw it in the troubleshooting chat to just see if everyone else has any clue what that is about. Cool. Thank you, Cameron. Cool little updates. I like the effects. Looking really, really nice. So yeah, looking forward to the next update. Yeah, it's been a while since I've done like any very specific stuff with rendering, so unfortunately can't really help you there because yeah, the vast majority, as most people know here, is spent in in-house engines, not in Unreal Engine. So yeah, my time is limited in that engine. Cool, let's see. And last person for getting the hands up is Liz. Let's have a look, Liz. How are you doing? Did I... No, Liz! You were too late! Sorry. I'm gonna have to skip you, and then we'll see if there's like still time at the end. I have not made the update to the announcement yet, showcasing like a local time, because I've been pretty busy. But I do wanna do that next week. No worries. We'll see if we can squeeze you in at the end. Cool. Let's go through a bunch more people then. We'll just go in order now. So let's talk about Alice's work. Thanks for the feedback from last week. No worries. I've added the moss back into the scene and added some more props around the scene to try and support the story more. I'm not really sure if these add much. I might have to add some extra detail in the texture for those, but please let me know what you think. So yeah, I mean, I think it looks more interesting. There's more stuff to look at, right? And it does work better. I still have somewhat the same conflicts that I had last week, right? Where I am still missing the relationship between this is an abandoned thing and you want to showcase like experiments, but there's no one really here to showcase that an experiment was happening. That kind of contradiction is still happening there, right? But maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe this is just okay to leave in this state. What I would do is probably to make the distinction even more clear is all these assets that you're adding here, make them feel more abandoned, right? Because right now, maybe the thing that's putting me off is abandon. Oh my god, I can't spell. Just gonna ignore it. Make them feel more abandoned. Because right now, it almost feels like this is relatively clean stuff in like an abandoned hospital, and I'm not really sure like how I'm supposed to marry the two in my head, right? So, yeah, that would be an easy fix, like make it a bit more torn up. Maybe there's not one flyer, but maybe there's like, I don't know, like tens of flyers on the floor, and maybe you rip them up into different ways and all that kind of stuff, right? So it doesn't look like the same flyer all over. But it just, because this feels like almost it's staged, right? We want to embed that more into the environment. And that's where making it feel more abandoned is going to come into play. Next, you were talking about the moss as well. You need to work on blending between the foliage and the ground. Yeah. So I think still looking at it from a shape perspective, right? I love that you added the moss back in. I feel like we can still make the moss more important. Not as in like, oh my god, the moss needs to be the focal point. But moss to me is a good indication of how long this place has been abandoned, right? Because that's really why I want the moss to be more prominent, so that you can really get a feel of, yeah, the moldy windows and the moss on the windowsill and all that kind of stuff. And then having the puddles on the floor too, right? Because moss lost moisture, the puddle hints at like a broken ceiling and all that kind of stuff, right? But yeah. But I would say be bolder. Like, what do we want the moss to be, right? Like, I'm saying that in a way that this moss is showcasing the history and the timeline for this place. That's why I want to add the moss in, right? And also look at how moss propagates, right? Like usually it spreads out from like a single place and then just grows and grows based on the moisture, right? And that also could have an effect on the scene where right now it feels like pretty much spread out, but if you then like really clump it up and like have it like more attached to the sides, have it just like a bit more impactful to the scene, I think that could be really interesting. But these are tiny details, right? I think we're getting pretty close. I mean, it's up to you when you want to finish something, right? I do want to say that, and this is a reminder for everyone. I know that I have a bunch of feedback most of the time, if not all the time. But it's also, you have to decide for yourself, like where to stop and keep going, right? So keep that in mind too. Yeah. Thank you, Alice. Hope that was helpful. Wencho showing off some beautiful shots again. So let's dive into those shots. Let me first put on some different music. Come on. Right. Where are you in the list? Very intense music. I know. Very dark, moody, mysterious. Cool. Okay, so 2 questions. What do you think about the composition of the detail shots? So I think these are great. I think this one looks really, really good. I would say with this one, again, it might actually be the same issue that we had with the scene before, right? Where it feels like this is an abandoned scene, but then the stuff that you put into it is like, this doesn't feel abandoned. This almost feels like, hey, I'm still watching television in my abandoned place. That's sort of the vibes that I'm getting, right? Whereas even if this is like post-apocalyptic, overtaken by zombies and all that kind of stuff, stuff is going to be deteriorating. It's going to be thrown around because you have people that leave, but then also other people that come in and try to steal their shit, you know, like there's a bunch of stuff happening here. And I think that layering is missing. This feels too perfect and too set up, right? So make it feel more abandoned. Add a bit more geometry to the newspaper. Make sure that it's also that it also has like a nice texture, you know? Because I feel like the texture is skewed, or like the UVs are skewed at this point. So that attention to detail needs to be there, right? Needs to be there. Also, I did add a little bit of note here. Show breakdowns, right? Whenever you're doing these really cool shots for your assets, show breakdowns. Show me the poly count, show me the textures, show me the UVs, show me all that good stuff. And if you want to have more context there, go and look at any of our portfolio reviews. All that stuff gets discussed constantly, right? So have a look at the latest stream that we did on Friday, talking about this stuff for your portfolio. There is also a video that you shared. Let me quickly throw the video on scene here. It's going to be cropped just a little bit. Sorry about that, people. Yeah, I mean, this looks good, right? Like, it's just like a slow pan, like zoom in. There's nothing wrong with it. I think, yeah, I think it's good. I think I also like that you added like the additional bits of movement in the scene, right? Like the slow rotation. Don't know if you had like any movement on the curtains. Let me just quickly take another peek. You have some movement on the curtain, which is nice. I think that's good, right? Showcase like a little bit of movement. Yeah, I think that's looking good. Solid looking stuff. Yeah, just a tiny couple of details to take into account, and show breakdowns. Please, please, please go watch portfolio reviews. It'd be so helpful. Right. Thank you for showing your work, though. It's going to be cool to see it launched. It's going to be cool. Next up is Roku. So Roku is asking about some breakdown stuff. So let's break down this scene just a little bit, or let's help in the breakdown at least. My question would be if I could get some advice on the way that I split up the concept into tidables, trims, etc. I think I could utilize the trim in more places, but I'm not 100% sure. So, yeah. Context, right? Context matters. I think that the more that I started using trims, the more we're getting into the realm where trims, just as a base texture without any geometry, is becoming more and more outdated, right? It's becoming more and more restrictive in the ways that, or the geometry expectations that we now have for games, right? So I would actually say that for flat stuff, that means wood, especially when it's like more polished wood, right? Rather than more rough wood, you can go with a trim sheet. But for example, with something like stones, roof tiles, red bricks, anything like that that could use for more detail, I would honestly just go less trim and go more with geometry. So I would actually try to build a kit, or I don't know, like a geometry trim sheet or whatever, that is more like you take the idea of a trim sheet, but then you make it out of more geometry. That's what I would do. Sure, for the main tileable surfaces and all that kind of stuff, you still want to use like tileables, right? But for the stuff that you indicated specifically, I would honestly just sculpt like a couple of these assets and make them out of those assets, right? So all the yellow stuff here is all indicated to be trim sheets. All that stuff, apart from the wood, because the wood is like very straightforward here from the looks of it, I would just make like a little atlas and a little kit for that. That's what I would do. Right. Pretty straightforward. I think the rest of it is good though. I had a look at it. Makes a lot of sense. You got your tileables mapped out good. You got your foliage, all that good stuff. But yeah, I would actually reduce your trims to mainly be straight wood. And even for like more damaged wood, I would potentially go for a sculpt instead as well. Because then you can have the benefit of like you have your straight pieces of wood where it's just like a trim sheet, and then you can break them up with like broken pieces of sculpted wood and kind of use like a combination of the two. But yeah, that's what I would do. Hey Joe, good to see you. How are you doing, buddy? Let's have a look. Next is Ashish. So I don't think there's like really any question here. It's more like, hey, look, this is my plan. Oh wait, no, there are questions. What am I saying? Do you think I should try to closely match the style of No Rest for the Wicked or focus on developing my own interpretation? No, so in the beginning, this is a tip for everyone who's thinking about like doing their first big environment or something like that, right? Do not try to design your own. Start from something that has solid concept or a solid reference or anything like that. And if you want to do something that's inspired by the style of No Rest for the Wicked, we're actually going to be talking about that just in a bit. So I'll do that for just a bit. How would you start planning something like this? Okay. We're going to dive into it. So you have this list of like goals for the project, right? Which is cool. It's cool to see. So you want to create an environment that feels playable. Cool. Good goal to have. How? What does that mean, right? Because I'm curious to know how. And this kind of goes into this sort of question as well, because you want to include a vertical exploration in the level, similar to No Rest for the Wicked. Does that mean that we're going to have I don't even know what like No Rest for the Wicked kind of what their camera angle is. Let me have a quick peek. Gameplay, yeah. So, okay, it's like three-quarter view, right? Where it's like a top-down Diablo kind of style. does that mean that your level is also going to have that camera angle, or are you going to go first person? Because that actually matters a lot in this equation, right? Because these two are incredibly intertwined. If you're telling me like, hey, I want to showcase vertical exploration, cool. Depending on the camera though, that's going to mean a bunch of different things, right? So make sure that you figure this stuff out. Use a modern nanite workflow with displacement and nanite foliage. The reason why this is a question mark is because I would say that this is, in terms of like the market fit currently, I would still go for more traditional, or at least showcase that you can also do traditional pipeline, right? Do not rely on nanite just by itself and go full nanite, because then you can only apply to pipelines that use nanite in their workflow, right? Which is not too many of them, question mark. Now we get into the interesting stuff, because you have these goals of like make the final result look like an oil painting. Or like the lighting in the atmosphere will be inspired by No Rest for the Wicked, or the textures will have the oil painted feel. These three they need to be tested. So what I would do there is you should not make a full environment with those goals in mind. You should make a small asset that tests if you can actually do that style. Once you've nailed that style, you can then make the full environment, right? Because I can guarantee you, if you build this environment and at a certain point, let's say 70% down the line, you figure out that like, actually, I cannot make this work, we're screwed, right? Then we need to undo a lot of stuff and like try to make it work at that point still, which is too risky. So that's why I'm saying, test all this stuff, right? Do a small scene, like a single asset or a single pillar, and like try to nail down the style, because once you have that, you've already hit the goal. And then it becomes easier to do the same sort of approach on like all the other assets in the scene, right? So test those things first. Do very small things, make little benchmarks so you can be like, hey, look, I want to make this an oil painted feel. This is exactly what I need to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And this is how I'm going to then do it on like a lot of the other assets in the scene. But you want to be testing this out. This is otherwise too risky to build an entire big environment around. So let's not do that. Cool. And then the last thing, learn Blender and GeoNodes for this as well. That is more optional. You know, if you are already comfortable with another program, you can keep using that. If you want to jump to Blender, that's fine too. But there's no need to switch, right? Don't feel pressured to switch if you can already do all this stuff in another program. Because honestly, from what I'm seeing, all this stuff, I don't really think you're going to be needing a lot of geometry nodes anyway. Incredibly exhausted, busy week, but I can sleep in Sunday. Let's go. Yeah. This week has already also been exhausted, but the weekend is also going to be picking the fill too with more course editing. But yeah. Yeah. I hope you're doing well though. I hope you're doing well. Hello, Eden. Good to see you. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. Make sure to test all this stuff. You gotta test this stuff out before you like dedicate yourself to like 6 months working on a project that you don't know that you can deliver, right? That makes no sense. But you were saying, how would you start planning something like this, right? For that, I need more context. I want to know what the camera is going to be like. It's going to be first person, top down, third person, whatever. And then honestly, how you want to, how do you want to like add that verticality, right? Because I have a lot of question marks here, where I think the best thing for you to do now is, well, first build smaller projects so that you can start benchmarking these little areas. And then otherwise what I would do is, I mean, I'm going to make it clear cut. I don't think you should be doing this big environment yet. Do a small thing first and then go to the big environment once you've like really figured out like how to do the style and what the camera angle is going to be and all that kind of stuff, right? That small test can take like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, right? But once we do that, we have clear sails to do a bigger scene, right? Because what we don't want to do, and this is good advice for everyone, is whenever you do this breakdown and you are not comfortable in at least 70 to 80% of all this stuff, you are putting too much hay on your on your pitchfork, and you're not going to be able to do the scene. I can almost guarantee it. I can almost guarantee it. So yeah, in your case, go smaller, I think. And really test out those things before you then dedicate yourself to a big scene. Joe is saying, it feels like that mini goals is low-key dangerous. Might burn out fast because you will get overwhelmed with all of it. Yep, 100%. 100%. And this is the thing that I see a lot, you know? Where ambition and, you know, I want to do big stuff gets in the way of actually finishing stuff. And I've seen so many projects die over like the last couple of years that I've done with Wednesday, you know? So, yeah. Please avoid yourself that. Cool. Next person, Sai Sadvik. Let's have a look. Where is this scene? Oh, there we go. For a shrine, what do you think about the scale? Scale's good. I had a look at this before. I think the scale's good. What more can I add to the scene to make it look more interesting? Right. Cool. Let's talk about it. So, I'm going to keep this very high level. But if you want to make things more interesting, how to make things interesting, right? We can ask yourself a couple of questions. I'll need to refine this because I was listening to things who talk about this, and I think it's a good way of putting it. What is it? Who is here? Why are they here? When this is in the wrong order, but like, ask yourself these questions, right? Sure, the what maybe is also already explained. When is already explained, but these two, who and why? You know, why are you focusing my attention to this temple, right? Like, why am I looking at this? What's the story behind it, right? We want to condense all this stuff down into a story. Again, environment artists' bread and butter is story, right? If you want to future-proof yourself, that is what you need to be thinking about. Story. What are you telling me? Like, what are you pulling my attention towards? Because if this is just a temple, there's 1,000 people who make just a temple, you know? But if you can attract my attention with like something unique, right? Like putting your own spin on this temple, then I'm bought in, right? So think about that story. Question number 2, is the layout good? What can I change the layout to make it more interesting? I honestly think that the issue is not the layout. I think it's what you put in the layout, right? Because I like what you're doing. I like your composition. I feel like with your leading lines and the way that everything is going to work, it is going to be really, really nice. The only thing that I would say is block the background more. Because basically you have like all this open space behind here. I would honestly just keep on building like more bamboo forest or whatever it's going to be, right? So that the focus is more here than the potential of me being like, ooh, what's there? That looks nice, right? But that's the only thing at the moment. I think if you want to make this more interesting, start with the story. You know, tell me something about this building and make it really visible, right? Make it noticeable from a distance. Cool. Thank you, Sai. Mm-mm-mm. Doo-doo. Working on my underwater scene. Yeah. Yeah. Nice one, Eden. Keep it going. Let's see. Mechval is next. Let's have a look. Keep blasting through these. Feel like we've got some good momentum today. I'm enjoying it. Right, cool. Questions. I'm planning to change the composition to the scene to focus more on the monastery itself compared to the wider shot of way before. Do you think it is a good idea to follow the references more closely in composition and layout of the monastery? Yeah. That's your choice, really. Right? Like if that's what you want to do, I think that's what you want to do, right? I think both of it can work. So yeah. I would again say like the same thing is gonna happen. The same question that I have here is with the wider angle, it was easier for me to like convey a story, right? Like the story of pilgrimage, like it's high up in the mountains, all that kind of stuff. With this new angle, what's the story? Right? Like how are you gonna make it unique from this camera angle, right? Because if we're gonna go more close up, then sure, it's gonna look better to showcase like all the assets, right? But what is the pull? Like, why are you pulling me into the scene? Like, why are you showcasing this, right? So think about those questions as well, and think about the story. Second question is, I have made an overpaint of the remaining elements that don't have a trim or a model. Just wondering if you had any thoughts on the overpaint. Let's have a look. This makes a baked element. I mean, static meshes. Yeah. I got you. Yeah, no, this looks good. But that is pretty much the only thing that changed are like these beams, right? Which kind of makes sense. I think that's a good choice. The rest of it does make sense to me, man. So I don't really have anything to add there. Plan's looking good. Yeah. Yeah, that allows you to put like way more attention into them as well. Yeah, man. Good. Trim sheet should be fairly quick since it's just some different painted wood elements. Yeah, I mean, you had the trim sheet already, right? You just needed to like refine them, I think. Yeah, you had the line around already. So that is good. Yeah, man. Good shit. Love it. Right. Expedition 33. I've not played the game. Not played it myself, but it's looking cool though. Let's have a look. This is the final version. Should I keep the tree, remove it, or replace it with something else? Oh, that is not the final. Missed out. It's a great game. Yeah, I know. I keep missing out on great games. I just don't really make time to play like a lot of games. And when I do, literally, I play Factorio. Wait, what tree are we focusing on? The green one, right? Wait, I think this is more appropriate. So basically, the choice is A or B, and it's like, do I keep this tree or not, right? I don't think so. Factorio is a great game. I know. And I'm just having fun with just like mindless stuff now, right? Like I'm just really enjoying it. Just for the time that I have to play, God, just need something that is like easy to pick up. Play like half an hour and then I'm done, you know? Let's see. Should I keep the tree, remove it, or replace it with something else? No, I think removing it is fine. Because it allows for more focus on like the compositional element that you have here, right? Like all these things like pulling you in is really cool. And I feel like this is tightening that space like a little bit too much. So I like that we have like a more open view. I will say that in general, in terms of colors, I potentially like the color contrast or like the color combination here more. But I'm going to explain like a couple of reasons why. Because sure, the colors can be cool, right? But there's some fundamental stuff that's here that we can replicate in this other scene. And I think it's because we have more of a gradient in the skybox, right? Because we have like this bright spot happening here, which is like really interesting. And then we have like this sort of tapering out to the edges, where that is not something that happens here, right? So if we do something like this, and we'll say, we'll take this one. Bear is also saying, I prefer that one more. Yeah, and I think it speaks out more, right? It's more contrasty, it's more poppy, it's more interesting to look at. But let's see what we can do here. If we turn this to black and white, we're gonna break this down a little bit. You can even see it in the values, right? So if we compare the values here, you have a brighter spot in the middle compared to something here where it feels more muddy. There's more contrast between the brighter values and the darker values, right? So that pulls you more into where you wanna be seeing. Which is good, right? And that means that we don't necessarily need to change the colors, but we can also adopt this thinking, this sort of like value situation here where it's like pulling you in. We can also transfer that to here as well if we wanted to. Yeah, this has just like more interesting contrast compared to something that feels a little bit more muddy in terms of its values. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. This is looking like a really cool scene though. I like everything coming together. I like all the little flowers as well. They look cool. Yeah, great stuff on the scene. Yeah, just I prefer this color scheme, and I prefer it being open. You know, it feels more epic, feels more impressive. So yeah, cool stuff, Ilya. Cool stuff. Ben is up next. Latest project State have modeled in some of the props and implementing the rotating secret door idea. Also added a few particle effects to liven up the scene. Okay, cool. Is that just like a showcase of like weekly updates, or do you want me to look at something? So you see modeled in, implementing the secret door idea, which is cool. A couple things from my side then, a couple of quick ones. The lamps are block out, so I don't really care about that too much. A couple of things to keep in mind is consistency in style. That is something to keep in mind because we're seeing the table and the stylized floor and then this coming in, and it feels like a bit all over the place, right? So keep that in mind. Try to be consistent with the style that you use. And then also think about the way that things are constructed, right? So how are things made? For example, this edge of the wall is just a cutout, right? This is like a simple boolean. But yeah, for example, this fire here, right? Like, how does that function? And what is its function, right? Like, because we want to be able to read whatever's happening in the scene just from like a quick glance at it, right? We want to be able to understand it almost intuitively. So think about like how things are made. Think about their function. Yeah, and think about keep checking your references and your proportions and all that kind of stuff over time as well. So this comes down to references. And this is again why I'm a big advocate of using concept art, right? Or using a pre-existing concept or a very specific picture, because coming up with stuff yourself is really hard. And you want to be able to look at something that has done all the hard thinking for you so that you can focus on the thing that you should be doing as an environment artist, which is like translating 2D from 2D to 3D, and then putting your additional environmental storytelling on top of it, right? No offense, but that second pic looks a little bit like an AI composition in colors. Maybe it is. I mean, not the scene itself, right? The scene is not made by AI, but I can get why the inspiration or the reference might feel like it's AI. Who knows? But it does have that feel to it, yeah. Well, let's just make like a little note here, right? Like references, you want to have real references. Always important. Don't trust AI with anything. Go to the source. Don't use games, don't use AI, don't use someone else's work. Like, just go to the source. That's where it's at. Cool. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for the updates. And then, oh yeah, Ben, feel free to ask me any feedback on anything, right? Feel free to be specific with that question as well. Because otherwise there's not going to be too much for me to say. Next up, Matt. Matt is not the latest because we are going to make a little bit of time for Liz as well. Ah, come on. Where are you in the list? Oh, there we are. Oh my god. Few questions. Do you think there's too many beams on the house? And does it look like it makes sense? I don't know if the beam patterns have a function or a meaning to it. Ah, well, so that would be a good thing to figure out, right? It's understanding how it's made that is going to give you a better understanding. Because I'll reveal the secrets, right? So if we're talking about beams, then it's like, what's their purpose, right? And also, why are there no beams on like the first floor? You know, that was also like in your little write-up here too. I'll tell you why. You can actually see it here. First floor, usually made out of stone. Stone or wattle and daub. because this has like a couple functions, right? It insulates better, insulation, but also load bearing, right? So you want to have stronger, supportive, and potentially more expensive materials at the bottom. And then you build a wooden frame on top of it with some cheaper stuff, which is usually wattle and daub, because that is just like mud and hay and all that kind of stuff. And you can just like fill up the holes, right? So anything that you see in here traditionally, you have your timber framing. Then you have basically like slats in between. Let's take this little section, right? So you have like your timber frame here, which is your main load-bearing support, right? So that's this sort of section here. Then there is sort of like a mesh. These are wattle, right? So it's basically I think it's birch, like sticks of birch that get framed in the middle. And then what they do is they fill that up with wattle and daub, which is basically like the mixture of mud, clay, and hay and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's the medieval way of like filling up these houses, right? Because it was affordable, there was a lot of that material around, and it did actually like a pretty good job of like insulating too. But that is, if you understand that, then you can actually see that like, hey, there's an interesting thing happening here. Why is my first floor inset? And why is my second floor like bigger, right? That is basically because if you have your bottom floor, the way that they do that is they just have like beams like supported by the bottom floor just on top of it, but they are supported by the walls of the bottom floor, right? And they extend on top of it. Which then means that you can then build your, if we extrapolate this a bit, that we can then build our second floor with a little bit of extra space, just sticking out of the building, right? This is also why some of them look like so ramshackle and just like close together, because it was like a very organic building technique, right? So it allowed you to like fill up the spaces a little bit more as well. But this is basically it, right? So first floor, stone, oftentimes like cheaper materials. Traditional medieval style, you would sometimes even have like your cattle sleep on the ground floor, and you would have you living up in the first floor. But yeah, that's also why what we need to do here is we need to do the same thing, right? Every floor is basically gonna jetty like a little bit out. So that's what this is called. Jetty, because it just like jetties out from like the main building, supported by those beams, right? And that's gonna give this building more of a medieval character as well. Right, so we nerded out over beams, and then your second question was, I'm feeling that the first floor is a bit empty and I want to add more beams to it. But from refs, most of the little ref, the real life ref, doesn't have that many beams. That's again, same thing, right? Ground floor is made with different materials compared to the first floor, right? Oftentimes what we see now is that these are like newer builds, right? So what they did is they stripped out the walls and then they filled them up with like more modern materials after the fact, right? This is usually like covered up with plaster and all that kind of stuff now. But yeah, I think with timber framed houses you had lime. There was like a mixture of limestone that they did on top of that to help with insulation and also repellent for bugs and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, some additional context there. Some history lessons. Let's see. And then for the last one, we have Liz. So let me sneak you in here really quick. Yeah, thank you, Ramat. I hope that was helpful. A little bit of nerding out about medieval history. Cool. Let's get you in here, Liz. Doo-doo-doo. Hello, Tim. I got feedback from a friend, and he mentioned that my scene is looking stylized. Do you have any advice to make it more realistic? Wait, isn't that okay? I thought that was the whole intent. Do you have any advice on making this look more realistic? I have modeled the props based on real life references and also the concept art, but now I do also think that this looks too stylized. Right. At this point, I think the reason why it feels stylized is because like the textures are just not done, right? What I would advise you to do is, and this is something that we brought up in earlier parts of this feedback session already, right? Is if you are struggling with a certain element in your scene, I would say, sure, if the goal is to make things more realistic, take, let's say, your bars tool and use that as a benchmark. Because let's say, I don't know, I have faith that you can figure it out, right? But let's say we really can't figure out like how to make this more realistic, and we realize that at like 70% of the production of the whole scene, that basically means that we're dead in the water and we have to start from scratch, right? We don't want to be doing that. So I would say pick one asset and say like, hey, look, it does feel stylized. What can I do about that, right? So build yourself a benchmark around it and then see what you can do to make it look more realistic. Because I do agree that like this proportionally could, I mean, it does have like realistic proportions in terms of like how these different proportions between elements work, right? I think what makes it feel like a little bit more stylized is how exaggerated some of the proportions are. Not some of the proportions, some of the shapes are. For example, this curve already feels very stylistic, right? If you're gonna look at something realistic, then you probably are gonna see that it's gonna go way down. And then if you wanted to, I don't know, if you wanted to add like a little bit of wonkiness into it, you have to be a little bit more subtle with it, right? I think that could definitely help already. Let's see. Made it from real life references? Yes, but here's also another thing with real life references, right? You will find some crazy shit in real life. We have to then still use our artistic brain or like artistic vision and say like, hey, look, even this looks like too crazy for me to make it feel realistic, right? This was just an example. Maybe if you do like a proper texture pass on this can work, right? But this is just an example of what you could do with the proportion and the shapes to make them feel more realistic, right? What did they do? What did they look like? Oh, they look completely different in the concept. Okay. That is just an example, right? I'm not saying that you have to make them boring, right? I think you can still use the shapes here to your advantage. Oh, shit. But I think you might have to just dial them back. Instead of doing this, maybe just doing this, you know? Give them like a little bit of flair, but don't give them... Don't give them a lot of flair. I think also what could work. I'm curious. Because if that is... I think in general the proportions will need to be adjusted a little bit as well, right? Because if I imagine that this doesn't even have like a backrest, right? Let's do a test. So if these, sorry, we're just doing a little test here. So I'm using my chair, right? So if these like armrests are sort of at like the proportion where I would expect them, right? So let's say they're a little bit below my hip, which means a little bit below my hip. So let's say roughly halfway. Right, so let's say this is my measurement. Yeah, this starts to feel really weird, right? Because that basically means that this is my human proportion, right? Get back. That is my human proportion size, right? And I think from that you can almost immediately see what is going on, right? Looks strange. Yeah. Some advice on that, right? So if you feel that something is off, you get that sense like something is off. It feels stylized. I don't know if you do this already, but mannequins. Throw like 10 mannequins into the scene. Have one at the back, one behind the bar, like one sitting on a chair. Like I don't know, just sink him into the chair, you know, and it gives you a better feel of the whole scene, right? Because yeah, from this, that might mean that okay, cool. We have our armrest of our chair, right? That probably means that the bar is gonna need to be higher as well. Because if you imagine a bar is not the same height as like your hip, right? It's usually taller. So we will probably need to do some adjustments to the proportions. I will say though that like what you picked. Oh no. No, even in the concept. Even in the concept we can see the proportions are a little bit better, right? Because if we were to we can follow the patterns here, right? We can see that the difference between the bar and like the armrest is like a bit taller, right? So that difference already has a big impact. Sure, I drew my line like really crooked here. You can still see the impact, right? Like I think we need to exaggerate like some of these proportions. But yeah, I would say do a proportion check with mannequins. Unreal Engine has a mannequin that you can just use. I think you can look into the Unreal Engine content, like the folder, and just drag them into the scene. You got yourself a mannequin in there. But yeah, and if we were to do this exercise here, that already feels like way more manageable, right? In terms of proportions. It was there, but I deleted it eventually. I think too early. Oh, yeah. I would say never delete your mannequins. I'll give you a tip. I forgot what it's called, but any asset, you can basically hide it in game view. So what I do with my mannequins, I just click on the mannequin, I go into the details panel, I set hide in game, and whenever I go into game mode, it just removes the mannequins. So that it gives me control of like, oh, if I'm working, I can see the mannequins, and if I go in game, then I don't see them, which is really useful. But yeah, keep those mannequins there. That's definitely gonna help. But yeah. Yeah, I hope that was helpful, Liz. I hope that was helpful. Yeah, okay. That was good. I felt like the speed of this session was pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. It's still 11, and I think most of that just came down to me just like waffling for an hour in the beginning. But I mean, waffling. We did talk about like some interesting stuff, I feel. So yeah, I'm not gonna make it any longer than it needs to be. I still want to do some work like in this evening as well. In evening is shortening. But we will see each other on Friday. Again, Friday is going to be a shorter session. Because we are just going to focus on the portfolio reviews, maybe have a little bit of a chit chat, and then I'm going to get back into work for our courses. So yeah, we talked about Roblox. That's the most important part. Exactly. We talked about like potentially making freaking Skinner boxes for 13-year-old kids. Yay. Yeah, that was great. But no, it's always interesting to see where the industry is heading and to maybe see where opportunities for us as artists lie, right? And I think, in all seriousness, I think that's important, you know? And sure, you know, like, I don't agree with like what Roblox is doing, but yeah, you know. I missed the memo. Are you releasing courses? Yes, we are actually. Yeah, this is a good reminder actually, because we've not really been that vocal about it, like even in Discord. But we are building our own courses. So we are currently working on around 25 individual courses based on a bunch of topics, and we are gonna go into like very early testing in a couple of weeks. So the initial idea was that we're going to release at the end of this month. We want to take like 2 weeks extra and make sure that we get them all like nicely polished up because some stuff came up in the meantime. But we will be testing with a small group in the beginning of March. So yeah, March is going to be chaotic. It's going to be releasing the courses in early access and then also Team Challenge. Yeah, going to be chaotic, but I'm looking forward to it. All right, John. I'm heading out. Have a nice evening, and we'll see each other on Friday. Bye-bye.